Please welcome everyone. Khairat, you have a seat? You're fine? Okay, perfect. Please welcome back to the second financial panel. Today we have the value chain of finance and how digital technology impacts the value chain in finance. Finis origine pendet means the outcome depends upon the beginning. It's a noble thought. But what happens when we have no origine, beginning, which is not optimal, or worse, a situation which outright is dysfunctional? A social structure which leads citizens to leave their homes and countries and cultures. An economic structure which excludes citizens for not being active participants in society. Or a socio-economic fabric where poor citizens have no chance at all. Some numbers. Today we have around 6 billion people in the world. It's expected to double in the next 50 years. 6 billion people, 2 billion people have no bank account. That's 1/3. 1 billion people live below $1 a day. $1 a day. A coffee in Davos costs $5 to $10 a cup. And we drink it in 5 seconds and burn our mouth. We have 1 billion that are poor. So roughly 1/3, 2 billion, have not only not a bank account, they are poor. The global GDP today stands around 110 trillion US dollars. The top 10 countries contribute 50, half of that, to the global economy. Fintech might provide a solution to give those marginalized citizens and companies not only an identity through which each one can become an active citizen, but also to be able to become financially included. The loss of global GDP because of financial exclusion is huge. We talk about 3 trillion US dollars that are wasted, completely wasted, because the ones that are marginalized cannot be reached. The biggest job creators in the world, which leads to social stability, to have a job and an income, are the small and mid-sized companies. It's the SMEs. The small companies provide most of the job growth in the world. They are the backbones of our economies and our societies. It's not the big companies. 70% of the biggest job-creating companies have no access to capital. They cannot get capital to buy their goods in order to have a product and outcome. It's about friends and families, very inefficient and very costly. Let's learn from our lead panelist what we can do to apply new technology in order to onboard these 2 billion people and in order to onboard the 70% in the SMEs to become financially included and provide the jobs and fill the gap of the $2 to $3 trillion. I would like to welcome the panelists one by one. I tried to put together a chain of experts and active participants. 2 unfortunately could not come. 1 was due to sickness, they had the flu. So I tried to put together the value chain of economies when technology, future technology, meets economic realities, and how we can address these dysfunctional societies and onboard them in our, on the good side of the world. Please, Ugo, professor at the Graduate Institute, who's one of the leading economics for developing nations. Please welcome Ugo. We have the privilege to have a young company which has built a fully functionable online bank based on a 2-generation experience started from her father, who was the Deputy Minister of Agriculture in Brazil, who was trying to include the marginalized entrepreneurs, not only to give money, because to give money is one thing, but to get it back is another thing. Now, you might be a noble thing to give the money, but if you cannot enable those entrepreneurs to have a market, a stable market to sell their products, to repay the loans, the system will fail. Dinah's father experimented this full economic cycle with the United Nations for the past 30 years. Dinah took all the experience to include the marginalized entrepreneurs, to reach out to the marginalized, and to include them in the full economic circle, applying the new technology of blockchains, and it's working along the Sustainable Development Goals. Please welcome Dinah from Brazil, Brasilia. Women are one of the most marginalized participants or citizens in our society. We know that companies who have more women engaged and in leadership positions and on boards perform better. This is not an opinion, this is a fact. We have Fortune 500 companies have at least one or several women on boards perform better over long term than others that don't have. Now, in emerging markets, women are mostly the backbone of societies. They are the ones who are more prudent with money. Some of them are providing the money and the proceeds to their families. They're more prudent in money management, yet they have no chance to control their financial assets. To onboard women and to give them the opportunity or the power over their own destiny of their money is a huge, huge deal. And we have the privilege today to have Anna Kincherman, who has been working for the past 20 years, correct? 20 years, please, 20 years, to reach out to those women. They have more than 24 million clients in the world today for much of microfinance from the Women World Banking Federation. Please welcome Anna. It's one thing to talk about societies that don't work. And as long as it doesn't touch us, we are here in Davos, it's beautiful, it's messy, it's a lot of snow. Yes, it's a headache. It's a lot of headache to find a room to sleep. But it's only a headache for about 3 days. We can party all night. We don't actually need to sleep in Davos. But what happens if you don't find a place to sleep on a permanent basis? If we have no identity whatsoever, if we are marginalized by our own societies and countries, where do we go? How can we, despite all that, become an active member of our societies when we are outside our jurisdictions, our homes? New technology might enable to onboard us even from a distance until a society stabilizes. We have the privilege today to have a member of such a society who tries to reconcile that gap and conflict, to bring back an identity to the marginalized citizens, which is a necessity to onboard them in the financial fabric and economic fabric. Please welcome Prince Idris Al-Senussi from Libya. I thank you so much for coming. It is a privilege. We have really members that represent in one way emerging markets, Dinah, from a top-down perspective, giving logic and structure, Hugo, to what is going on, from reaching out to the marginal one through the global community of finance with Anna, and the representative through family and through a long history of family pedigree, trying to reconcile a society which decayed for many reasons, and how we can reach out with new technology to reconcile what is not working to make a good society. I would like to welcome Idris to quickly present yourselves and how you see the technology can bring back the identity and reconcile a society which does not function, and integrate your citizens, which can be applied to other structures that don't work, in our economic fabric, make them independent again. Please.
Good afternoon and good evening, what can I say. Thank you, Caspar, for inviting me. I present myself as, of course, I'm a member of the royal family, and I lived in exile most of my life. And I went to Libya after 42 years in exile. Today, what I see, and of course I traveled most of Africa, I know Africa quite well. from Ethiopia to Nigeria to Guinea-Conakry, to Guinea-Conakry, Equatorial, all over Africa, Chad, most of Africa travel. The problem we have now today, you need a national identity to get access to the technology, to get to your bank account, to get this. The problem we have today in some countries of, I can give you an example of Libya for a fact, some people have bank accounts, or they cannot get bank accounts, but they cannot get access to their money. And so this is my experience where I can say, to be inclusive in the economy, you have to have a national identity. A national identity, that means you need an electronic identity. And we don't have access to electronic identity. And this is what I'd like to open the panel about.
So you do not have an identity, and how do you think new technologies might enable to give an identity to the ones who have not an identity today, or might not use their identity?
They are trying to do, I'll give you an example in Libya as a fact, they're trying to do a national ID, electronic national ID, and it's very difficult to do it because of the open borders, and because some people don't have, they don't even have because you see, they tell you first you have to have electronic number, then you have to have a national ID. Then once you open a bank account, and 70% of our Libyan society get their money or their salaries from the government. They go to the bank, they cannot get access to their money. It's their salary. They will allow them only a small amount, maybe 10% of their salary. So when then they go to a shop, they cannot buy because they don't have electronic devices to buy with. And if they do a check, that will cost them 10 times more. So it's a very complicated. I think technology can solve a lot of these problems, because technology can bring the gap of between your access to your own money or credit, or if you want to do a business, you feel inclusive, and then you can progress towards democracy. And the only way you can be inclusive of everything, you have to have, I think, the democratic system, because you will have the same rights as everybody else. That will help you. That means you are not dependent you don't have to go to an employee of the government or an employee of the state to tell you, okay, please do for me this favor, because you have a system. There's a government. There's a democracy. You can vote. You can elect your civil servant, and this is the only way. I think technology will progress towards democracy and will progress towards your rights as a human person. This is part of the human rights. I think that's what the world should do about.
Technology brings an identity. The identity allows democratic processes. Democratic processes and financial inclusion.
It will give you a self-esteem. It will give you self-respect.
Self-respect over your own life and over your destiny.
Your dignity. And that's the most important
dignity. Now, Taina, you say, well, there is a problem and we have maybe a solution. You have developed successfully a platform called Moeda, which means money in Portuguese, correct?
Coin, yes.
Yeah. And Taina, please present yourself and what you do and how you reach out to the ones who have no chance today with the newest technologies that you can find.
So thank you, Casper, for having me here. It's such an honor being such an amazing panelists and brilliant people and brilliant work that you have done and prove upon a time. I'm from Brazil, and as you all know, Brazil is well known about corruption. And it's very difficult to do anything in Brazil. It's a complex system. It's complex to have different stakeholders to work together, like government and private sector. And for us, through the experience of my father working with the cooperative system, we found into cooperation the answers. Cooperation between the private, the public, and the people. So we do a private-public partnership with the people, because the people was always the missing equation. In Brazil, women in the rural areas, they are financially excluded. They do have access to capital, but it's very expensive. The average interest rate is around 143%. Like, you cannot do seed money or whatever and expect to turn over. You end up in that for many generations. And what happened is the lack of knowledge. So when there is a lack of knowledge, people take advantage. And intermediaries, they take advantage from people. The private banks, they take advantage. And then when you need emergency money, you go to a credit card, and then you are 1,000, 3,000%. So we are offering loans, but not just the credit. We are going a step further. First, the credit is less expensive, between 5 and 15%, which from 143% is a lot. But also the technical assistance and the support and the infrastructure that they need to grow and feel safe, and the knowledge, the business plan, the feasibility study, and everything that is required to be successful. And we also go in partnerships to bring contracts to them to bring income so they can pay back and they feel that sense of dignity and belonging. Because once you have the knowledge and once you have the capital power and once you have the network system to support you, you are free to make decisions in the right mindset, the mindset of abundance. And that has been so far my mission in life, to bring to those people the real opportunity that goes beyond the capital. And I'm very happy to make a lot of progress and be able to be funding such strong women and capable to inspire generations. So.
Thank you so much, Dina. That is an incredible task that you have in front of you. And what you have achieved is really remarkable in a country of, how much is it doing? Almost
200 million.
200 million people is Brazil, yeah.
Yes.
And you are also reaching out to African countries now,
yes.
to Southeastern countries.
India.
So your concept of integrating the entrepreneurs in the full economic cycle is real.
Yes.
And you're one of the leaders in that. Well, congratulations. Now, all of this is, we look at particular cases now, but we have to take a step back and see how developing nations, or nations in general, are not only being structured and conducted, but also how the international community can help them, put them on the right track. Hugo is a leader in exactly these aspects. Please, Hugo.
Okay. You didn't ask me to describe myself. I had a nice story, so I'll tell you what my daughter thinks I am.
Okay, your daughter thinks you are, besides being a daddy, I hope.
So I went to talk with the teacher at my daughter's school, and her teacher told me, "Can you please tell me what you do?" And I said, "Why?" "Well, we asked the kids to talk about their parents, and your daughter said, 'My dad is a nerd.'" So that's what I do according to my daughter. Mm-hmm. So I think today we'll be talking a lot about the opportunities of this new technology of distributed ledger. But when you asked me to write a sentence, when Caspar asked me to write a sentence to introduce myself, I said there are a lot of opportunities, but there are also risks. We don't want this new technology to become the new POIs. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a country called POIs. No?
Who has heard of POIs?
Has anybody heard of a country called POIs? This is a country that
Here we have Tobias.
Excellent. So this is a
Please welcome Tobias, the head of the Economic History Department, University of Zurich.
Exactly.
Tobias, you have to explain. You have to explain who is what or who or what is and where is POIs.
Yes.
An island that never existed.
Yeah. So it's a country that never existed, but it sold bonds, it sold land, it sold currencies, and the place did not exist.
Maybe a quick break here. Well, that was a real historical situation. POIs was who promised that land?
Gregor MacGregor was a Scottish general.
Scotland.
Yes,
and it was in when?
1821, between 1821 and 1837, the POIs bonds were sold.
1827. And what was the reason why they sold those bonds?
Well, so this is exactly that's why I want to draw this parallel, which is a parallel of 200 years ago. There was a lot of optimism. This was the time in which countries like Brazil and, and Argentina were developed, and there were massive investment flows, and, people in London buying bonds issued by these countries, and this guy, this Gregor McGregor, said, I'm going to make my own countries. and he sold bonds, and he sold land. And then when people were getting the bond to go to this place which did not exist, he was, next to the boat and telling the people, by the way, before getting on the boat, you can exchange your pounds with Poyais currency with me at a favorable exchange rate, And some of these boats sank, and some of them arrived on the coast of Belize, and everybody died of malaria. So the point that when you have a new and disruptive technology in our case, but in that case, a new situation, so these great opportunities in something which at that point was not well known, these opportunities, there are and they exist, but it's also easy when information is not well distributed to get cheated and to get to have an impression that you can do certain things while these things cannot be done. So this was sort of my warning, before drinking something, you have some warning label. And then, but indeed, there are a lot of opportunities. Do you want me to start talking about this now? You want me to
maybe in the next
later?
round,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you so much. So let's avoid the Poyas.
Yes.
Let's hunt the real Belize. That's good. So we go from a dysfunctional society and opportunities fintech that can make them functional. We go from China to a concrete example, a working example, how to reach out to the marginalized entrepreneurs, and to the top-down view of an economic fabric, and then how we can profit from the new technology, now coming from a very top-down view that is actually providing to 20, how many million?
I mean, it's actually over 30 million.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
over 30 million,
growing,
and
yeah.
70% are women, correct?
Yeah.
70% are women. The financer in the microfinance structure from top down. Please, Anna.
Yeah. So great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting Women's World Banking to this important forum. As Bert said, we are kind of one of the oldest institutions in the space of financial inclusion. We've been around for over 40 years, based in New York, but work in over 30 countries, in 32 countries, with 50 partners that range from traditional commercial banks to now mobile network operators, to specialized finance companies and microfinance institutions that come together to really innovate around tools and solutions to include a greater number of people in the financial system, especially women. As Casper mentioned, there are about 2 billion people who are currently excluded from financial services. There are about 1.1 billion women. And the three main barriers that we see for women to access financial services are they're time poor, they don't have the time to go and stand in lines and queues in a bank branch. There's a significant geographic distance to the nearest bank branch. The research says about 80% of women spend 80% of their time in the radius of 5 kilometers from their homes. There are very few bank outlets or financial outlets within that radius. And then there's also an important component of what we call emotional distance. Women feel traditional financial institutions are not for me. They're either for rich people or people with more education, etc. So we believe that digital financial services, or the power of technology today, really is uniquely positioned to address all three of those barriers, bringing the bank to her through the power of mobile banking, having new educational tools and awareness-building tools to really make advance her financial capabilities, and also, again, importantly, reducing the transaction time she needs to do to kind of manage her financial accounts, right? By being able to do it from her living room or from bedroom using devices that are accessible to her. So addressing the issue of being time poor, emotional and geographic distance. So very, very excited about what that can bring to 1.1 billion women who are currently excluded.
1.1 billion women in the world who have no access to capital today.
Financial service.
Financial service.
No bank accounts, any kind of financial
1.1 billion
service.
people.
Yeah.
Just a little comparison. In Europe, we have how many citizens? 500, roughly. US about 300, North America 500. So 2 times entire Europe don't have a bank account or are underserviced. That's correct.
Right.
Amazing. Where does all that money come from that is being channeled to all those marginal citizens? It can come from friends and families, but more importantly, it comes from one of the single biggest money pot, let's say, called pension funds. Pension funds are about, correct Hugo, 50% of the investable money, the liquid investable money roughly, in the world being invested through in different asset classes, among others emerging markets, and they trickle down, among others, to the microfinancial institutions. It's also the biggest drivers on one hand. So this is the supply side. Now the demand side from the pension fund system is we have to generate a return of around 5.7%. It's more, depending on the society and the cycle of society, in order to meet the pension obligations. Now that's a big number today in negative interest rate to have a stable return. I am dressed like a sailor, blue and white, a low-level sailor, a cadet without decoration. I am on a cruiser and I'm patrolling the seas of global finance in white and blue. And as a sailor, we have a saying, which is, water, water everywhere. And all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. That is the salt water, referring that the boards stay dry. The hot sun and the salt sucks out all the sweet water. They are made of all the water. Well, today this could be translated into money, money everywhere. And all the SMEs did shrink. Money, money everywhere, nor any penny to drink. I would like to ask a panel, how, despite all the flush in liquidity we have in global markets, why can we not rechannel that money to reach out and accommodate this 1.2 billion women, this 70% of underbacked SME, which provide the majority of new jobs in emerging countries and in the world, and to provide the one-third of the population which are underbanked? Maybe, Hugo, I would like to start with you.
Well, economists have an easy answer to that. And let me practice it. I mean, there are 2 problems. The first problem are fixed costs, and the second problem is enforcement problem. So the fixed cost, you know, it cost me about the same to study the creditworthiness of somebody who's borrowing from me $1 million and somebody who's borrowing from me $200. But on $1 million, you know, if I have I charge some interest, I make, you know, if I have a 2% spread, I make 2% of $1 million. And, you know, if I lend $100, I make 2% of $100. And I have the same fixed cost. So in a sense, lending money to larger borrower, it's more convenient from a profit point of view than lending money to smaller borrower. On top of that, in fact, it's even more expensive to investigate the creditworthiness of small people than of big people, because big people, big borrowers, have credit histories that small borrowers don't have. So, and this is telling you, and the people to whom it's very difficult to lend, in fact, when you lend to very small individual consumers, it's difficult, but it's not so difficult, because you have hundreds of thousands of borrowers, and there's, you know, statistical properties applied, the law of large numbers, and you have well-known distribution, and you know that you're going to lose 20% of the money. You don't know exactly who, but you know you can build a model. But when you lend to this medium-sized, small and medium enterprise, each of them is different, and that makes it very, very difficult to lend to these guys. And therefore, any technology that makes the cost of assessing creditworthiness lower, any technology that makes the cost of building credit history lower, it's fantastic. So let me give you an example. Alibaba in India, Alibaba in China. You know, it started as a trading platform, but by helping these small people to trade, it was able to collect a huge amount of information about these guys. And now it can use this information to extend credit to these guys.
Yeah, but if you don't have technology, how, especially some countries like Africa or Libya, how can you know something about them? They don't have a bank account, they don't have a national identity, they don't have a national electronic number, they call it electronic ID. It's impossible. You can apply this to some countries who are advanced, but you cannot apply it to the developing countries. Like in Nigeria, today you borrow money at 30%. Okay, that's very expensive. Or I don't know, some other countries. I think what you're talking about countries who are developed, not underdeveloped countries.
No, they have a mobile phone, right?
Yeah.
And they have a phone number, right? That in some countries, including Nigeria, can be used as your, for KYC1 level of.
So quickly,
your
KYC
customer,
refers to?
Know your customer.
Know your
to
customer.
be able to open the basic bank account, right? You don't, you need to collect very basic information. In countries like Nigeria, you can just give your cell phone number, right?
Yeah,
So and your name.
And some countries in Africa or Libya, they don't even work, so they don't work, they haven't traveled, they are there. They don't even know they exist or they don't exist, right. which is unfortunate, especially after civil wars like in Somalia and in Libya and countries like that. When they have civil wars, there's more women than men, and the women have to look after their children.
Right.
Unfortunately, they have many children, and they don't have access to anything. Some of them have to sell themselves. I'm sorry to say it, but and they don't have. And then when they go to a bank or they go to anywhere, they lose their dignity in order to feed their children. So we have to do something to help these people. That's the only. The technology. I think technology will not give them. So the woman, she doesn't have to go to see a man, or a man does not have to go see. Through technology, there is a wall. So he only has to fill up information, and he can access to his money or to his credit. Or this is what I think.
So we can jump the gap and break the walls through existing infrastructure or ways of doing things and lowering the cost in assess the creditworthiness of an individual. One of the most powerful you mentioned marginally is applying or utilizing the data for the social networks. The social networks today are probably the biggest data producers about an individual, how he lives, how he behaves. Somebody who might not be able to pay back the loan on time as agreed on a contract, but most of the time people do pay back the loans. Even applied to entire countries that defaulted on loans a long time ago, some decades ago, like communist societies, did pay back even a part of the loan to come back on board to the global economy. Tobias, I would like to ask you a concrete historical question. Tobias will publish a book in a very short time, and looking at the World War II through the eyes of debt, how finance drove societies in the world's the biggest atrocity that we had in the past, since ever, through debt. Now, what I would like to refer in that point is, you also studied the history of the debt and repayment of debt. How long was the biggest gap that the country did pay back the debt that defaulted a long time ago?
I think Ugo has published more about it. But I mean, you have a whole variety of repayments. One extreme case was Russia after the revolution. They didn't pay anything. Others pay over a longer period of time because they're restructuring. So you know more, but actually you have every variation of that repayment.
But most did pay back.
But the interesting thing is that usually even those countries that did not pay back everything could come back to the capital market and usually get quite nice conditions, given that they had defaulted before, which is kind of a puzzle.
So even if you don't pay back, eventually there will be a second chance.
Yeah, and third.
And the third chance. So what I would like to do, so in entire societies can default, individuals obviously can default as well, but we have situations where some circumstances we are not able to repay back on time. That doesn't mean we do not repay back eventually. And the new social platform, social networking platform applied with artificial intelligence and big data enables us to assess the creditworthiness in their cosmos of economic, in their economic cosmos of range of activity of an individual or a company that could lead to an opening up of new channels. And Taina, you apply exactly that, the customized way how to assess individuals, which is not on the standard creditworthiness, correct?
Exactly. Oh.
We both. No, please.
No.
Yes, Taina.
Yes. So we built what we call impact credit. That is a positive way to reinforce credit, where we take into the accountability the cooperation, how the people are supporting their community, gender, how they are supported for the women and into their community, the environment. Is their product sustainable or not? What they are producing? Is there a lot of waste of water or not? Trust. Are they in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals? Are they can be held accountable, like what they promise matches what their execution? So everything we are taking into the accountability to build this new credit with not just the ability for the people to pay back, but to pay back to the community and to the society, which is very...
And if they never had any business, and they never had any activity?
Never, and sometimes...
How would you evaluate that? If they never had any business, they don't have experience in business, they don't...
They always have someone that knows that they are credit worth it. Someone in the vendor, that they go to the supermarket, the local market. Even women in the rural areas, they do exchange milk, the cheese, the biscuit, the things that they do. They have the community of trust. And we translate that trust that they have within their community into the system, and we take that into the accountability. That forms their unique identity. And the identity where we can bring a new measure and new metrics to measure their impact and their ability to... And women has this beautiful thing. They think in a long term. They think into their generations. So the decisions that they make, most of the income that they receive, 80% is towards the family. So the women has the highest payback. So we see the Grameen Bank, like the examples, and across the globe, when you handle money to women, they think differently. They think in a collective way. And that's why we prioritize women, and we do support men that support women.
You support even men that support women. Well, that's a good step. You mentioned a very, very essential thing, that you create, I quote you, we translate the community, we translate the community of trust to shape their identity.
Yes.
Is correct?
Yes.
I repeat, we translate the community of trust
to shape
their identity.
Yes.
And their identity, which then leads to the possibility to become financially included.
To access opportunity.
So we have three words which actually lead the bridge to what Idris is struggling with, the society, I mean. It is the translation of the communal trust, starting with the family and friends, with the local, in your case, tribes. It can be other social structures, and then to create an identity.
And we have also a big problem, which is the religion, the religious part, which is the extremist religion. The extremist factions of the religion who are stopping
the diversity of belief, which can lead to a lot of conflicts.
Which leads to a conflict and stopping this progress.
This progress.
Of course.
So I would like to pick up the point of identity, because without an identity, it becomes impossible to apply all this technology. Without an identity, we cannot do anything. And a lot of people do not have an identity. What means to have an identity in the world of finance and how technology can create an identity, even though we might not have a passport. Most people do not have a passport. I don't know how many Americans have an issued passport. Most, they use their driver license to justify their, basically whatever they do. I don't know how many, in Europe probably pretty much everybody has a passport. Most of the world, they do not have a passport. They don't have an identity. Without an identity, you cannot be an active member in the democratic process. And without an identity, you cannot be financially included. Idris, I would like to come back to you because it particularly affects your situation, that a lot might have an identity, but it's useless.
I'll give you an example. In Libya today, you can have, they started saying you must have an electronic number as a person. Now they said you must have some other another registrations. And some people could not produce a document which says that they come from this country or from that country. And you know, it's a tribal society, and some tribes, they refuse. For example, I'll give you one example, the Tabu. The Tabus are between, and the Tuareg, they live in Mali, in the borders of Libya, Chad, Niger, and this. Some of them, they come from the other countries, some come from and the problem we have, the other tribes will not accept the other part of the tribes that come from the other countries. Say, no, these Tabu are not the Libyans. They are the Tabus of Chad, or they're the Tabus of Mali. And it's a problem to get there. They cannot get their ID. They cannot go to school. They cannot get their education for their children. And women, especially if she has, because of the civil war, some women lost their husbands, and so they could not prove that they're. It's a huge problem. I think if you have the national ID is very important. The electronic number is very important. If you have access to technology, you solve all this problem. You solve this problem. Then you can have access to credit, to your money, to your bank account, to everything, your passport, your ID. And this is the problem. It's the internet or the internet which does not work. So you have to have access to internet. One day you have it, one day you don't have it because you don't have electricity. Everybody has a mobile phone. So that maybe can solve the problem where if you, like Kenya, they're using payments through the mobile phone. Maybe a lot of it, this is the most progressive country, I think, in the world, using payment by mobile phone. Maybe this can help. I think
maybe this can help, yeah. And we see a huge progress in Kenya today. About 40% of financial transactions are conducted to M-Pesa already.
Yeah, more than that.
More than that, actually, you're referring. So, talking about identity, how important is the identity, and how do you provide with new technology and identity in order to become bankable for your 30 million clients?
Yeah, so totally agree with the point that form of national identity is very, very important. So, to be able to access finance. I think from the point of regulators also, I think where we see countries that have higher percentages of financial including people, it's where they have what's called tiered KYC system, where you can open a very simple bank account, where you can have low volume of transactions with using just very kind of your phone number, your name, and your address. If you want to go to a higher number of transactions.
Some countries don't have address. You see, in some villages,
there are different ways how you collect it and so on. Yeah. So, but having this approach of tiered KYC enables people with less documentation to be able to open accounts cheaply.
Yeah.
And basically cheaply, and in more transaction points, right? So that's very important, and that's where we see a lot of progress. We also see a lot of progress where biometric technology is being used to be able to provide those national ID in a way, again, that's cost efficient and can be leveraged in different industries. So of course, Aadhaar system, national identity
Aadhaar
system.
maybe quickly refers to India, which
has really onboarded over 1 billion clients in a couple of years.
In a couple of years, and it is just amazing. I mean, so 1 billion people in India, which had absolutely no, or mostly, I would say 90% had no identity, today have an electronic identity.
Yeah, exactly.
That's correct.
And, something I should have mentioned about the work of women's role banking is that traditionally we work only with the private sector players years, but now increasingly we work with government agencies that provide subsidies through digital payment platforms to millions of women, low-income women and men. And we are seeing this electronic payment channel as an on-ramp to further financial services. So that's very important, and that's what's been driven actually
So depending on which societies recycles, they have different forms of identities, but the identity is key, and the technology
and
is a
women
solution.
Disproportionately lack identity. You know,
right.
so it's a particular
There is another problem. Now, there's people, because of these civil wars in some countries like Somalia, Libya, Chad, if the husband dies or the man dies, his pension cannot go to his wife because she does not have an identity. So she becomes from one day or to another
Separated from their own family because
poor, and she has no access to money, she has no access to anything, which is a big. This is one of the problems because of the technology, lack of technology.
Hugo, how important is an identity to reach and this 50% of global pension funds in order to reach all these marginalized citizens?
It's important. You cannot do anything without an identity. So the World Bank estimates that about 1 billion people who don't have proper identity. So it's key. And here where this new technology could be disruptive, really, because so far they've been applied to try to establish identity, but what they have been doing is more, people who already have an identity, and I'm going to load it on the internet, and and so these people can communicate. But this new technology, this new distributed ledger, could actually be used to create your own identity, which is separate from your identity, your national identity. So I have my Italian passport, and then I would have my digital identity, which is separate to my Italian passport. Now, it's a technological issue. You need to have it in a way in which everybody trusts it. And by the way, so one of the big original problems of the internet is the fact that you didn't know with whom you were interacting with, right? So you're interacting, I'm online, and there is somebody on the other side of a transaction. I'm not sure who is this other person. And the market solution to this situation in which, in which this identity layer is lacking in the internet, now what the market is supplying is basically you're often asked to verify your identity with Facebook or Google account, right? So now this identity verifying process are private providers.
Google. How, if you are not educated, how are you going to get your digital identity? Women and men in Africa.
I'm going to get to that in 1 month. Let me just finish this. The big issue with this, what is the joke about Facebook and Google? That, right, if you get a product for free, you are the product, right? So these guys, they're giving us something for free, but our data, all this information, we are the product. So if we were able to create, again, through distributed ledger, an identity which is open sourced and is not proprietary, so now our identity is certified by Google and Facebook, who know more about me than my wife, this would be a really disruptive technology. And in order to do this, you need systems that talk to each other. One big problem of the current distributed ledger technology, Bitcoin, all these things, which are closed systems that don't talk with each other. So now there is tendencies of not Microsoft. The Gates Foundation is playing a role in putting forward system which create this interoperability. I think I'm saying the word right. That is creating systems that can talk with each other. Now, your question is key. I mean, without, if people are illiterate, if people don't have access to electronic, so this is a different problem. It's not that this new technology is going to solve all the problems. I mean, it's a step towards solving some problem, but together you need health delivery, you need education delivery. There are, so there are some people that says, new technology might help you in better aid delivery. So to make aid delivery from international organizations or even from bilateral dollar to poor countries to reach the final beneficiary of these things with less expenses and less corruption. So if that's the case, that part of the technology will help solving the education problem, and then we complement. But clearly that's
solving the corruption problem. It's the worst thing which we have in Brazil, like you said, also in Africa. It's the worst thing. Corruption is stopping the progress of these countries and,
Yes.
also people from doing anything. Corruption is the worst thing.
Corruption is the worst thing. Thank you so much. I would like to open the floor for a couple of questions. Please. We have no questions. Technology will solve all the problems. We can include 2 billion people. That is remarkable. Taina, you have a question yourself.
No, I have a part of the solution I see in the young people. That is a program that I deeply respect in Kenya, called KUSA. They developed something called the the rural entrepreneurs. They are going to the communities that are far, far away in Kenya and registering those people and giving them that identity. So I think we do need to build this army for good. And I think the help will come from the young people that should be their first job experience helping someone to give them identity and dignity. And as more than we support people in the universities to, instead of doing their final works and putting into the trash, to doing a final work into a community and bring them the first identity, I think we should support that. So we can support the army for good to really make change.
And I think there's something else, which I think the pension funds, sometimes they keep a lot of money where people die. They don't give it to in countries in Africa and stuff. I think they should spend it in education. If they spend more money in education, since they sometimes cannot get access to their money or their family's money, they should spend money in education. I think education will be the key, and the social media is the key to get rid of corruption and advance these people in their everyday life. I think this is what I believe.
Will, please present yourself. And it's a privilege. You're the only one. You came with 1.5 participant here, and you'll be sleeping under your chair. So he's a very active. So we have actually a new citizen here, being financially included.
Yeah.
Where is the microphone? Where is the floor mic? Oh, please.
In Switzerland, 100%, probably it's going to be the new class. I had one quick question, and maybe all can answer. The big concern that everyone has, especially investing in finance or participating in it, especially in emerging market or disenfranchised area, is sending the money. That's the easy part. But some of you have a solution for also recovering the money and then reinvesting it. And I'm curious to see how you went about accomplishing this.
Well,
yes, please, Anna.
I mean, I can start with kind of maybe addressing some myth that the poor and marginalized people don't repay, because we collected lots of data over 40 years of existence, kind of the repayment rates of women and SMEs at par or in tough economic times are often better than of larger corporations where those questions are not being addressed. So I think it's really about also creating awareness and debunking some myth that the poor don't repay. So I think I would start with that. Just let's look at the data and go deeper into what further concerns are out there.
Yeah, and also for the sustainability too. That is a myth too, that you can either do good or do well. You can do good and do well at the same time by supporting someone in other part of the world.
I think the point is like this. The general metrics that we use to take decisions don't really apply to any of these situations. So value perceptions and everything else aside, we just need to understand what it is really, how you are connecting with the people. Obviously, there's a big commitment on their side to participate in the broader economy, but really how you embrace them and then how they embraced you and then how you actually got to work through a full business cycle. This would be helpful for us to understand, because this is a strange area, I think, probably for most of us that we wouldn't normally go into. Yeah.
I think there are more and more large-scale companies that because of technology, that are getting engaged in this space. And you see more and more business models around mobile money that, one of them that Caspar mentioned, M-Pesa, but there are many more examples right now in the world that show very, very positive results, and kind of variety of business models in a very transparent way that are out there that are reaching the masses. And while we are talking about 2 billion people that are currently excluded, I do have to say that in the last 4 or 5 years, 700 million people gained access to financial services. So that's on the positive side because of technology and mobile money solutions.
And
so
that went very fast, actually.
Yeah.
And we have to put this in context of time. That happened in the past 5 years.
Exactly.
And that is enormous amount. I mean, almost 700 million you mentioned. That's about the number that I understand.
That's according to 2014 Findex numbers. And the new Findex is coming out in 2 months. And I think that gap, the 2 billion is going to shrink. We don't know to what number, but it's definitely a smaller number. So it's progressing. And there are more and more business models that are commercially viable, that are out there demonstrating this success.
So probably this is a big number, and it talks about a quantity, but it doesn't talk a lot about the quality.
Quality and usage.
But we go step by step. First, you need to have a quantitative accessibility, and then you see how you can reach them.
Absolutely.
With the things, yes. Another, please, yes.
Mrs. Steiner talked about young people and students helping poor people to get an identity. What about all these millions of people in Europe who get unemployment benefits, who are bored because of doing nothing? Is there a way, an idea of how to divert these financial resources into that sector?
Yes, absolutely. Time and resources, we have a lot that is misused all over the world, not just in Europe. That could be bringing the bridge between, and many technologies as well that are applied here that could serve in Brazil with people that can, and we can provide jobs into this whole network system for people that are unemployed right now and is into a risk in a very unstable world. And especially I talk about the young people unemployed because their first job is getting harder and harder with the time because they don't have a curriculum, they don't have an experience, but right now they can have that experience and have their curriculum by giving their time in a project in Brazil. For example, I do need technical assistance into my projects, architectures, specialized engineers, and people that have time that are here in Europe that could be serving the necessities and knowledge that I do need in Brazil right now. But right now it's a matter of us thinking in how can we make those global policies together to make governments work with the private sector so I can better hire someone that is abroad. So that with the self-sovereign ID, even the passport was something that was invented a couple hundred years ago. It's something new, the passport. So why we have so many barriers right now to have people from Europe helping someone in Brazil? That is with capital. If you sign a check right now for 1 million euros to send to Brazil, to do good, to send to an NGO in Brazil, that check will take at least a month to be cleared, to go through all the banks, will be costly, someone will take a cut, will be many intermediaries. The same, if you want to work as a volunteer into an NGO in Brazil, for you to be legally hired or work in a legal matter, there must be agreements between countries and between people to see how important it is for us to collaborate in an international level and make less barriers and less bureaucracy so people can help each other and collaborate and be more efficient into that collaboration.
Let's take down those walls. Idris.
I want to ask a question. How do these women and men who are marginalized, I can say, how do they get consumer? For men, it may be easier, but for women to get consumer credit. consumer credit. They want to buy groceries. They want to go to a supermarket. They will say they will pay over 6 months, over 3 months. They want to buy a television, a telephone. How would they get access to that consumer credit? Consumer credit, not to do business.
I mean, depending on the country content, they still need an ID. Okay. They still need a formal ID if it's a formal credit, if it's a formal company and not any informal sources. That's why your cause is so critical and important for the advancement of financial services. You need to have a basic ID to be able to access.
For example, like in Europe,
they cannot access consumer credit.
They don't have a, so how can we create that? Ugo. We know to help these people, because if you create consumer credit, then you create the economy, it grows, and then there is more business, and and you also for them is a way of business.
No, but again,
because if a woman, she's selling something.
Yeah,
this is part of an integral development process. So again, you cannot think that one type of intervention is going to solve all the problems.
No, she has a suing house, and then somebody says, I cannot pay you for the dress or for whatever, but can I pay you over a few months?
Yes. Yeah. So these customized financial solutions become possible because of the cost of data is going down, the cost of accessibility of data is going down, and so on. Yeah. So I thank you so much, everyone. We conclude this panel. I try to summarize. To reach the 2 billion people with new technology, we need to, Daina, translate the community of trust to shape an identity. While Anna says education is key to properly include the 1.2 billion women financially, which are excluded today. Ugo, the opportunity to reduce the cost of the study of creditworthiness is fantastico. While Idris, technology will give a dignity to people to control their own financial destiny. Thank you so much, everyone, to be here.